they'll never put the Blues and the Thunderbirds together because they don't want to, show each other up.
It's a very unforgiving industry, a very unforgiving place.
Hey, the Blues are only 200 miles from here. Let's smoke them.
The Blue Angels have had the rare privilege of demonstrating
To the American public the precision techniques of naval aviation.
No, Matt, we're a 9G limit. I think, were y'all 7.5, or do you remember?
We were 7.5, and I always thought that if you're using 9Gs, you're not having a good day. So it's either somebody's going to get shot here in a minute.
Hello, Blue Angel fan and viewers. Thank you so much for tuning in and watching the show. This particular episode is about the differences and the similarities between the Blue Angels and the Thunderbirds, and we know that you're going to enjoy it. As the president of the Blue Angels Foundation, we want to say thank you for participating in this show and supporting the foundation and helping us and our veterans receive the PTSD care that they so desperately need, and supporting their mental health, physical health, providing for the transitional housing, and we can only do it with you. So click the link below if you want to continue to help support our veterans. Thank you for watching.
All right, let's hop into it. We're about to peel back the differences between the U.S. Navy Blue Angels and the Air Force Thunderbirds, and I have the two perfect guests to do that with me. First, coming into kind of enemy territory here, we got Mike Beale. He was a Thunderbird pilot in 1990 and 1991, and is actually currently the president of the Air Force Thunderbirds Alumni Association. So, Mo, thank you for joining.
You bet.
And yeah, and then we've got, from the Blue Angel side of things, we've got Matt Seamon, who was on the team from 1989 when he started as a narrator, and then fleeted up into the solo spots in 1990 and 1991. So you guys had some crossover during your time on the team. And so I want to put you guys on the spot really quick. Is this the first time you guys have seen each other since you left the respective teams?
I think it probably is.
I think 1990, probably. I don't think we had a get together our senior year when we were number 5. So
Yeah,
it was
I agree.
probably 1990 when we were both number 6.
Like
far
on a
as I
beach
know.
in Pensacola, maybe.
Yeah, definitely. No, it was
On
at
the bay.
Trader. It was at Trader John's
Yeah.
because we had a bicycle or a bathtub race. If you remember that.
Yeah, of course. Imagine that.
Well, this will be fun. I'm happy to bring you guys back together for this, and I appreciate you participating today. It's going to be fun. Before we really hop into breaking down the differences of the team, I want to get a little bit of side story from each of you. And Mo, why don't we start with you? What really inspired you to pursue a position on the Thunderbirds when you were in the Air Force?
Yeah, well, I grew up as an Air Force brat. My dad was a test pilot and a fighter pilot in the Air Force. And we traveled a lot, and I did go to shows as a kid, and I just it never really came up until after I started a tour as an A-10 Warthog pilot, and then I was a T-38 instructor pilot, and I was waiting to get my teeth cleaned in the dentist office in Enid, Oklahoma, and I picked up a Reader's Digest while I was waiting, and it opened to an article on the Thunderbirds. And I thought, this is an omen. So I put in a package for the Thunderbirds. I go, why not me? And they gave me a nice letter saying thanks, but no thanks. And I tried again a year later, and I got a tryout. And so that was sort of it. I mean, the Thunderbirds was something that I've always looked up to them and thought they were really neat, but never really thought about the possibility until then.
Oh, nice. And Matt, what about you? What drove you to apply for the
It's
Blue
kind of
Angels?
funny how these things are kind of little things quirk it up a little bit. I was going to school in the flying club at University of Michigan, doing a lot of flying and working through my ratings and stuff like that. And I'd seen all the ads for the military, never really thought much about it. And then for some reason, it just clicked one time, and it came on. It was actually an Air Force ad. And I said, oh, that looks kind of like fun. And so I went down and talked to the 2 recruiters just out of the blue. I had a lot of flight time at that time, so they were kind of interested. And turned out the Navy guy was a lot cooler than the Air Force guy, if I can say that. And that's the way I went. And actually, I think it ended up being a really good fit for me to be in the Navy. And I was just going to join and get in, do my time, and get out and go fly for the airlines. But it just sort of grew and grew and started to love it. kind of got introduced to the Blue Angels. I did a presentation of the movie Threshold. I don't know if you ever seen it. It's the F4. They go to Hawaii and all sorts of stuff, and that kind
Oh
of lit
yeah,
a
we
fire under
love
me.
Threshold on this channel.
Yeah, so that kind of lit a fire under me. I actually did a presentation at school with that, trying to drum up some business for the flying club, and that's kind of where the road got started down the road. Kind of on a little side note, I was out deployed in the Persian Gulf and was really starting to think about it seriously. And I'd met a guy who ended up going to the Blue Angels in the training squadron I was in. It was Mike Gershon. So I wrote him a letter from the middle of the Persian Gulf and didn't get an answer back because about that time frame is when Mike had an accident in Niagara Falls, and so kind of a downer. But I still had the fire lit underneath me and went in and went for it.
Well, yeah, I appreciate you both sharing your journeys there to the team. And so, why don't we start with the history and the cultures of both teams? And Matt, since you were already speaking here, why don't you start with talking about when and why were the Blue Angels formed? What was really the mission when they started?
Well, the cool part about this is I was the narrator, so I can just go right into since 1946, the Blue Angels had the rare privilege of demonstrating to the American public the precision techniques of naval aviation, hoping to inspire our young men and women to pursue careers in the United States Navy and Marine Corps. I can do it backwards and I can do it a lot faster, but actually that really does sum it up. That's sort of the whole goal of the Blue Angels is to pull and get the message out there and show the excellence and just like me, out of the blue, so to speak, saw an Air Force ad and got interested in it. That can happen at any time. So we just keep going and put the image out there, and it's the same thing for Mo, I'm sure.
Yeah, well, let's talk about so the Blue Angels they're 79 years old. They're turning 80 years old next year. What do you think from a culture perspective really makes the Blue Angels unique from either just the fleet in general or the Thunderbirds? What makes the Blues unique?
Okay, I think well, it's different and it's the same, and so it really is. A formation of what's important in the Navy and throughout the Navy and through military service in general. It's just a dedication and it's always working to hone your craft. And the Blue Angels, you just narrow down the field of what you're doing. It's basically three air shows and which are parts of each other, and you just do it and do it and do it and do it. Sometimes you don't have the luxury of that in the fleet of doing that, especially out in an aircraft carrier because of flight time is just so limited because of the being out in the aircraft carrier. But the basic message is the same: is that it's a very unforgiving industry, a very unforgiving place, but we get an opportunity to really hone that skill and keep going. So that what's important to being in the naval aviator is important to being in the Blue Angels, and it proceeds all the way through.
Gotcha. And Mo, why don't we talk about the Thunderbirds? What is the origin story for the team?
Well, we were, surprisingly, even though we are the Air Force, we were 7 years behind the Navy. I looked into that a lot. We actually had a bunch of demo teams over the years. And famous guy Claire Chenault, who was the Flying Tigers lead in China, Burma, India theater in World War II, was very noted having a demo team. But all these teams would start up and fold and all that. And then between World War II and the Korean War, jet aviation was starting to come on. We actually, everything we had jet wise was committed to the Korean War. And as that was winding down in 1953, they signed an armistice. We had some iron there. And in June of 1953 at Luke Air Force Base, a guy named Dick Catledge was approached and they said, "You are the new commander leader of the Thunderbirds, make it happen." And they gave him a couple weeks and they started the show then. And so it was really post Korean War, and it was the first jet team, which was still a new phenomenon at the time. So that's sort of how we got started. Again, we had a bunch of teams over the years, but nothing that stayed intact until 1953. And then we're coming up on our 75th here in 2028. So we're already starting to plan for that, our reunion.
Yeah, so 75 years. Talk about the culture of the Thunderbirds. What do you think makes the Thunderbirds unique from a culture perspective?
Well, it's pretty highly selective, and I think when you ask a lot of people whether it's the Blue Angels or the Thunderbirds, they cut their teeth seeing an air show and they go, I want to do that. So we're a big recruiting tool, a big inspiration to a lot of people. And so I think that's a large part of it. It's very selective. And I think getting the opportunity to fly as much as we do and to do some of the stuff we do appeals to a lot of people. So I think that's a lot of it.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, look, this question is for both of you. I'll open it up. Obviously, I think since the pandemic, we've really seen a collaboration. And I'm just from the outside looking in between the Blue Angels and Thunderbirds. The Thunderbirds have been going to winter training with the Blue Angels for a week, and they've now done the Super Delta a couple times, which looks really impressive. But what would you describe from your time on the team, or just in general, your observations? Do the teams have a rivalry, and how does that really manifest itself?
Oh yeah. We joke because somebody will say, "Hey, you with the Blue Angels?" Or they mention the Blue Angels, and I always go, "Who?" The Blue Angels. I go, "Who?" Oh, you mean the Navy swim team? Okay, so it's that kind of stuff. But we really have a close collaboration, and we're both, people go, well, they'll never put the Blues and the Thunderbirds together because they don't want to, show each other up or whatever. But we're both scheduled for air show. There's such a demand around America and the globe for demo teams that we might have any weekend a bunch of demands, and they allocate us out. But Department of Defense schedules us, so it's rare that you get the two teams together. I know we did last year down in Pensacola, had a show because the Thunderbirds had canceled a show in Texas, so it worked out. But it's hard to get us together. We do track each other, and Matt can probably attest to this. Hey, the Blues are only 200 miles from here. Let's smoke them. So maybe if we can take off and go over and smoke them on our way to the next show site, or there was some of that over the years, but it's always a friendly rivalry. We try to get together every year. I know was I was still early on the team when we went down to Pensacola, and I got to meet Matt, and I remember that whole team from Commander Moneymaker, Chase Mosley, Matt, Inman, Lee Gron. A few of I remember all the names from that because we had a little competition at Trader Joe's. I guess they've got these bathtubs on wheels. Do you remember this,
our
right?
idea. Yeah, I do. I think
And
the
we
mayor
had,
won or something.
well, it was terrible because we put the bosses in each of them, and we had it's about a 50-meter sprint with the rest of the Delta pushing their bosses, and we split, and so we had a third heat, and after doing 350-meter sprints, and a few of us were around the corner dry heaving because it was a lot of work.
I don't know if you remember. I think did we go to Scott Larson's house that time with the boats? Do you remember that, or was that the year before?
I think that might have been the year before. I don't remember getting in the
Okay.
boats. My
Yeah,
wife
that was
came out, and I remember I got a few pictures with you, and I think you had two or three kids, and
two.
two kids, and your wife and me and my wife. I get a picture of my scrapbook because I was showing it to Ryan the other day.
Well, Matt, what about from your perspective? You ever smoke the Thunderbirds or pull a good prank on?
Yeah,
Pull a
we
good
had
prank?
one. Actually, it was I wasn't physically in on it because I was a narrator at the time, but I think we were in Brunswick, Maine, and they might have been somewhere nearby. And the word came down during the brief that because we had got an earlier show site that they were actually still on the crowd line signing autographs or just finished their demo, and so they said the whole Delta went down and smoked the walk down or the crowd line. So that was kind of famous. I've got my events coordinator Bruce Dillard was in the back seat, and he said they were laughing so hard they had to clear the formation because it was just they were having a great time. So we do a lot of that friendly stuff. The recruiting. It's kind of an interesting thing that both teams recruit for the other one, and the DoD sees that as not necessarily Air Force versus Navy. Just like I went to watch the Air Force commercial and went to end up flying with the Navy. So they kind of keep the show sites apart because they see us as actually gaining customers, if you will, for the other folks. So I think it was like 150 miles we had to be apart, and you can only do so many repeat show sites year to year. The obvious ones like they would do the Air Force Academy every year. We did the Naval Academy every year, but besides that, you got in at the bigger show sites, you really got into an alternating pattern a lot. So while we didn't actually fly together that much, you always heard the stories or the from the other for the next show site because you were alternating show sites every time. And then typically what we do, what Mo's talking about is a lot of times you get stuck because we'd be out on a West Coast swing and have, like Miramar and San Francisco shows. And now you've got some time in between. And we don't really like to go more than a day or two without flying to formation. So you're looking for a place to go. The previous show site wants to get ready of the next show site isn't ready for you. So that's when we'd end up in Nellis. We went to Nellis one time, and they'd come out to Pensacola just because you can go do a practice show, kind of unannounced. And I think maybe this one in Pensacola last year was one of the first times I'd seen it where it was advertised as in both teams.
Yeah, that was an outstanding show. Let's talk about the aircraft that you guys both flew. Mo, you flew the F-16, and Matt, obviously the team's in the Super Hornet now, but you flew the F-18 relatively after the team had transitioned from the A4 Skyhawk. Can you guys talk to me about the performance of your individual aircraft and maybe some of the key differences that you see between them? Mo, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, at the time they had a competition between the F-16 and the F-17 back in the day. F-17 essentially became the F-18. The Air Force chose the 16, and the Navy ended up going with the F-18 later. I think it was 2 engines versus 1 engine was the big driver, but very similar characteristics. I don't know, no, Matt. We're a 9G limit. I think were y'all 7.5, or do you remember?
We were 7.5, and I always thought that if you're using 9Gs, you're not having a good day. So it's either somebody's going to get shot here in a minute. But I think that was probably the biggest difference was the G limit, but also I think and over to you on the G limiter. I think you guys had a lower angle, not G limiter, the angle of attack limiter.
Yeah.
I think you had a little lower angle of attack. So
Our jets had
was
a
a trade-off
digital
between
flight. Yeah, digital flying. We could pull as hard as we want on the stick, and the jet was smart enough to know not to over G. And angle of attack wise, y'all had much greater ability to rate your nose up than we did. Our jet would limit it sometimes, but I think overall, characteristics wise, they look similar. That turn rates and everything, very similar.
Yeah, I think the only it's pretty much the same, very similar. The only thing I'd say is that after a single engine failure, we do a lot better. So
We are all glider pilots then.
sorry, I had to let that go.
Did either of you get a ride in the back of the other aircraft when you were on the team?
I didn't.
I did not. We flew with a snowbird. He probably flew with the snowbirds. We
I
ride
didn't
with
get to
them
do that
periodically.
either.
Oh, really?
The lead solo my year, Chuck Greenwood flew in the pit with I think Braun with Lee.
Okay.
But we only have a couple of what we call family models, the 2-seaters. So it's really hard to do. Everybody would love to, but yeah.
Gotcha. Well,
Yeah.
let's talk about the transport. Oh, sorry, Matt. Did you want to?
No,
Hop in there?
I flew in the back of an F-16 in Belgium, actually setting up the European tour. They gave us an opportunity to fly in the back seat, so I got my 1 hour. It was fun.
There you go. Well, why don't we talk about the transport aircraft that are so critical to supporting the team's missions? Obviously, Matt, why don't we start with you? We know the Blue Angels, they got Fat Albert. Why don't you talk to us a little bit about Fat Albert and its support of the Blues?
Yeah, sure. So we do have the C-130 Fat Albert. Does an air show, a couple flybys and stuff. They do an air show usually before we fly, but they're always ready to go. And it's really kind of a self-contained unit. I mean, they fly that airplane in with about half the enlisted crew, all wedged in there on web seats with pallets of stuff between them. So it's not the most glamorous way to arrive. But I would like to put in a press for those guys because as competitive as it was to get on the demo team, it's twice as competitive to get on the enlisted team. If you're on a typical squadron, you got 1 or 2 really outstanding sail of the year type guys, and those were all the guys that got picked up for the Blue Angels and got selected for it. So I mean, they were phenomenal. And I think we're going to talk a little bit about the philosophy, but that really played into the philosophy of the team because once you were at the show site, nobody left until everything was done. And so if we had something big going on, major maintenance issue of some sort, you'd see the photographer mate guy sitting there handing wrenches to the guys changing the motor or whatever. And so everybody just stayed until it was done. But that also gave us the flexibility for those guys to go back, fly back, sometimes some pretty late hours if to get parts if we needed a part for something. So it's an impressive deal. It's like a whole little airline by itself. We used to call it Fat Albert Airlines. So
Yeah, and famous for those JATO shots it used to do back in the day during
absolutely.
your time. Yeah. Well, Mo, it's a little bit different for I think you guys, right? Do you have a designated aircraft that is assigned to the Thunderbirds, or how does that work for you guys?
Well, we back in the 50s had something similar to Fat Albert, and they had a bad accident in I think 1957 and killed the entire enlisted team. It was 20 at the time. There were about 20 of them that were flying up there, and it killed them. And we actually have enough airlift support. We dedicate, and when I was there, C-141s. We would have a C-141 for each of our trips, and usually they were 2 to 3 week trips. And we call them Thunder. That was Thunderbird 14. It was interesting because some of the crews really got into it. We have just like Matt, I'm sure with Fat Albert. There's a process, and everybody on the team is part of it. And the C-141 crews, some of them would pitch in, and they were just part of the team and really embraced it. Other C-141 crews, probably dependent on the left seat pilot in charge, would be very stay apart, and it was just really interesting. But it was our wardrobe. We would each trip keep all our show suits on and take what we needed to the hotel. I do remember in August of 1990 when Desert Shield kicked off after Iraq invaded Kuwait. I came out to the ramp at Patrick Air Force Base to get my show suit and get ready for the show, and everything was out on the ramp. There was no, they had just thrown everything out, taken that plane, and it was deploying to start supporting movement of troops and equipment to Kuwait. And so that was an interesting time. We had to scramble to find some guard C-130s. We got a couple of them down there, and they became part of the team for the rest of the summer and became great, fast friends and really enjoyed it. So we pretty much take C-141s. Now it's C-17s if we can get it, or C-130s. And airlift is always a challenge, especially now with our expeditionary mindset.
So there isn't one designated aircraft that follows the team around present day.
There isn't, other than for each deployment, we'll tag C-130. You're it, but it'll be different next time.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, let's. This is one of my favorite questions to ask people. If you could fly, and Mo, I'll direct this at you to start. But if you could fly any other aircraft that the Thunderbirds flew in their history here, coming up on 75 years, outside of the F-16, what aircraft would it be?
It'd be an F-105. We flew that in 1963 for 6 air shows. On the 7th air show, they were pitching up at Hamilton Field in California, and number 2 on the pitch up, his plane broke up and the fireball it and killed him. And they grounded the entire fleet, and ended up they couldn't figure out what it was, and they ended up switching back to the F-100. They had the F-100 before that, F-105, and then back to the F-100 to finish out the season. They think it may have been dropped off. They were doing some gear swings on a F-105 that a few years before, they think it just failed structurally. But I heard from guys that flew it that it was a great machine, very loud, very big. You could see it. Actually had some, the guys seemed to enjoy flying it. I would like to do it because that's what my father flew in Vietnam as a wild weasel pilot. So.
Gotcha. And Matt, I'm going to take a guess at yours. You mentioned Threshold earlier. Would it be the F-4 Phantom for you?
Yeah, I've flown the A4 a fair amount in the training command. Of course, it wasn't an A4 like the Blue Angels had, because they strip them down and take all the weight out, put the bigger motor in. But yeah, the F4 was a pretty honking airplane. It's just a beast. And yeah, I think that would be fun. And the stuff they did in those things, as close as they flew, it's just powerful grace is about the only way I think to explain it. So yeah, that would probably be it.
Yeah, good answer. Let's go inside the cockpit. There's some key differences between the teams there. And Mo, why don't we start with you? Thunderbirds wear G suits. Blue Angels don't. Can you talk to me about why the Thunderbirds wear G suits? And you referenced maybe 9Gs earlier. Is that perhaps the increase in Gs is why you guys lean on the suit a bit?
Yeah, well, we try to we are representative of the United States Air Force in combat aviation, and when you're in a fighter, you wear a G suit. That's just sort of hadn't really thought about it much beyond that. We have a phenomena called G loss of consciousness that is a very real issue, especially in the F-16. They actually take people through the centrifuge, which is one of the most painful things I ever did in my life. Matt, I don't know if you ever had a chance to spin in
I
a
skipped it.
centrifuge. Horrible. And they do it to try and increase your tolerance. And I think that Blue Angel movie that came out last year, they had some good scenes in there with the centrifuge. But
Yeah, they did.
so yeah, we do wear the G suit for that reason. And another thing, and I don't know if the Blues, they probably have it too, but probably my most important device was the little stopwatch. We put it on Velcro and strapped it to the front of the HUD, and I would use that a lot to coordinate solo maneuvers. So that was one modification that we don't have in regular fighters, was the stopwatch that we used.
Gotcha. And Matt, so the Blues don't wear G suits, and do you want to go into the bit of the philosophy around that?
Yeah, I think probably the overriding philosophy was just that the G suits inflate at different rates. There's a bladder that sits right on your thighs, and that's where your arm is wrestling. In the F-16, they've got the side stick controller, so that's not really an issue. I've always been told that was the biggest issue was that you're trying to fly formation that close with your hand potentially moving up and down and changing your 0 point. Um, I think it also a side benefit. One of the reasons you can do it is because the G forces, although even up to 7.5, they're all very planned and choreographed, so you know exactly when it's coming. It's really interesting if you have somebody in the back seat sometime and they don't know it's coming. Even a fleet aviator has a really hard time back there. Interestingly enough, I think we probably use more instantaneous type G on the rendezvous than anything else, getting back together, and nobody ever sees it. If you ever watch an air show and you can look behind and see the airplanes getting back together again, and you watch them close on each other, and you say, how in the world are they going to stop that? And that's how you stop it, with a lot of G plus and minus G. So, yeah, it also is a side benefit once you don't have it. I think it speeds up the walk down and the man up and the walk back a little bit. We wouldn't do it just for that, but that's sort of a side benefit. You can just get up and get going.
Gotcha. And you mentioned flying close, right? How close do the Blue Angels actually fly from each other when they're in some of their tighter formations? And is there any philosophy around that?
There is, we talk about 36 inches from wingtip to canopy. I can tell you that it's a lot closer than that, particularly at the end of the season, particularly for the diamond formation. And that's sort of an interesting side note. You can probably look at a tape from an air show, and Mo could probably do the same thing. If you can look at it and say, okay, that's a towards the end of the season show, or that's a little bit earlier on, because the diamond's moving closer and closer together, and the solos are moving lower on their opposing passes. Um, we joined up with the Delta for the Delta formation. Everybody's a little bit wider there. They don't do the diamond set for that. So we're just a couple solo guys just trying to hang on. Hope our arms don't cramp up.
Gotcha. Mo, how about you? How close are the Thunderbirds flying together?
Well, I will say I never swapped paint as a solo, but it occasionally happened in the diamond. I do remember one time where in the debrief, the maintenance guys came in and said, "Hey, 4, you got some paint on your jet from number 3," and they had to look at the tapes to see where it could have happened. It's rare, but they do get really close, especially in the diamond. And like Matt said, the Delta, we loosened it up a little bit. And as a solo, it was, I think we had the best of both worlds, because we got to do all the fun stuff and also didn't have to fly close that much. But we got to sort of taste the whole thing. And we have a friendly rivalry in our team too, and I'm sure the Blues do as well. That the Thunderbirds started off as a diamond back in 1953, and the solo pilot was called the spare pilot. He would just come in and scare the crowd, and then he'd be there to spare out if anybody fell out. And they eventually evolved into a solo routine. So they call us the spare pilots, and we call them the fillers, meaning if you want to be at show center for the solo pass, go get your hot dog while the diamond's performing, and then when the solos come around, you can watch them. So it was always friendly rivalry.
Good stuff. One thing I really want to talk about here is because I think it's completely different for both teams, but the way someone progresses on the team from one year to the next. Like whether you stay on the right wing the entire time, or you go from the left wing to the slot, or go from the narrator to the 5 to the 6, or 6 to the 5. Mo, why don't we start with you? What is the philosophy around how someone progresses around the team during the course of their time on the Thunderbirds?
Well, it's a 2-year assignment, and there's 6 people in the formation. Now, again, to piggyback and echo what Matt talked about, the Thunderbirds is comprised of 130 members. 6 are in the show, but it's a big, big team. And so I'm going to talk specifically about the 6 in the show. Since it's a 2-year assignment, we've got 3 in their second year and 3 in their first year, and we always try and stagger it. So if we've got a new boss, then the guy flying underneath him, the slot pilot's in his second year. And if we've got in my case, I came on with a boss, so the right wingman was a second year guy, and I was on the right wing solo. So it adds a lot of stability to the formation if you've got a senior guy, because I'm bouncing all around. The boss isn't as smooth as he can be, and number 3 is rock solid. I can fly off him. Same thing on the left side. Number 2 was a new guy, but his wingman was very solid. The solo pilot over there, the lead solo. We don't switch. Matt, I don't know if you switch sides, but I was a right solo pilot. I could only look left. If I tried to fly fingertip formation on the looking right on the left side, I couldn't do it. Yeah.
It's like having a NASCAR guy make a right turn, right?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
And with the team, specifically the narrator on the Thunderbirds, I think traditionally, and maybe this has changed recently, but the narrator typically didn't fleet up into the actual demo. Is that true?
Yeah. It was true for a period of time. It used to be, the narrator is, I think, one of the toughest jobs on the team, and Matt could probably attest to that, because he or she they're the advanced team. They just have a lot of work to do, coordinating, being there, the first person on the ground to make sure everything's set up, last minute crisis management and all that. That was a 2-year assignment for us. From mainly it started General Creech, when he reconfigured the team. He's a very famous person because in Air Force circles, he was commander of TAC, Tactical Air Command, at the time, now ACC. And he was also one of the original, close to original Thunderbirds. And we had a terrible accident in January of 1982. And when he reconfigured the team, he didn't want anybody staying more than 2 years in the flying. So every time they tried to dangle a carrot in front of somebody, hey, be a narrator for a year and then stay for 2 more years, he's like, no. That changed in the 90s, and we went back to a 3-year assignment. The narrator now stays for 3 years. And there's pros and cons to that. It's nice to have that continuity, but it is a grind. And Matt spent 3 years on the team. He can probably talk more to that.
For sure. Yeah, man, I was going to get your insight here because the Blue Angels definitely, I think, operate a little bit differently on how someone moves around the team.
Yeah, we definitely do, and it kind of has to go with the needs of the Navy. And there's certain times where events happen that change things around, but the general flow for during my period and years before that was the lead is alternates. That's a 2-year tour, so he alternates every year. The right wingman was the Marine Corps representative typically, and they kept them out of phase with the boss. So one of them was a first year, one of them was a second year. The left wingman was a new person to the formation, number 3, and then 3 always moved to 4, which is a slot pilot, and then the new 3 came in, and so that 3 would be replaced by either the narrator or a new hire off the street come in. and it's kind of a different philosophy. And the solos were the same, I think, as the Thunderbird. You had a lead solo with the opposing solo, which wasn't a whole lot of a change. Especially for us, it's most of the solo maneuvers were opposing maneuvers, so there wasn't really a whole lot of new flying, different responsibilities, but not really new flying for the solos when you went from opposing solo to lead solo. I think the big advantage really by the system that we had is that the slot pilot is really the only guy that can see everything going on, both the profile of the boss and the wingman. And so I think that was the philosophy early on, was to have that be a second year guy, just because that's the guy that's can make the call if he needs to make a call, or can tell people to ease it out or move it back in again. So that was sort of the philosophy of how that worked, and it's really interesting that both teams sort of stuck with the same philosophy all the time. So both systems work. It's just a little different philosophy.
Hey, Matt, I'm sorry. You said you switched to left side in the Delta?
The left wingman always came to the slot.
No,
and
but
then
you as a solo.
for the solos, yeah, 6 is on the right side, and 5 is on the left side. Yeah, so you would change sides, and there's a couple maneuvers. We did a line abreast loop that 5's in and 6 is
Yeah.
not in. I think really the reason for doing that, other than just having the numbering scheme the way it'd been, there's a diamond roll that rolls into, and I know you can attest to this, but if a roll's coming into you, it's a whole different game than if it's going away from you. Because if you're rolling away from your airplane and you start getting out of position, all you have to do is stop rolling, and everybody moves away from you. If you're on the inside, you can't stop rolling because they're all coming towards you. So that's why we always had to. One of the reasons we had 5 on the left wing, I believe.
Did you find it harder to? Sorry to hijack it, Ryan, but did you
No, let it rip.
did you find it harder on the left or than the right?
Definitely harder on the left, and sort of an interesting thing about the dynamics of airplanes rolling in general is because it's not really a pure aileron roll. It's more of a barrel roll, really, for like a diamond roll. But just by the physics of the thing, you can't be not on the center line of the formation and have your wings level, perfectly level all the time without some jocking. And so we call it curl, which means that when the diamond does it, then you look at 2 and 3, and they may have a slightly different bank angle than lead as they roll through. And the debrief guys will call that. They'll call the curl. Well, the diamond loves having the solos around for Delta, because whatever curl the left and right wingmen have, that's where we start, and then we add our own curl on top of it. So we always get called for it. They're always going, no, it's 5 and 6 are curled, and not 3 and 4. So they love having us show up.
Yeah, and we call it cupping. It's a cup instead of a curl.
Same thing.
Yeah.
Well, great. Why don't we transition into how the teams actually prepare for the demo? Obviously, for us airshow spectators, it looks perfect, but it takes a lot of work to get there. Matt, why don't we start with you? Team's famous for their El Centro winter visits. Can you give us a little bit of insight into the team preparation?
Yeah, so the team preparation, basically, 7 is the narrator and kind of the on-scene commander, like Mo alluded to, because he's the first guy to show up at the air show. So we also have an events coordinator who's a NFO navigator. Mine was an A6BN, Bruce Dillard. And so his shop the 8 shop is working the air show the whole time. And then he downloads that to 7 for when the actual show site goes. But in the interim and during winter training, 7 and 8 go to every show site, which is kind of a unique opportunity in a Navy. They give you a jet and a spare, and a credit card. And they say, you got 43 show sites. We'll see you in March. And so that's what you do. As far as the team goes, being in El Centro, it has obviously some huge advantages. The weather's great. The practice area is right there. It's surrounded by a restricted area, so you can do whatever you need to do for getting the airspace. But it's time away from home, which requires something special at home. And in the Navy, we're used to, and the Air Force too, you're used to long deployments, so that's important. You have to have a good support group at home. But the fact that you can go to El Centro and that's all you do. I mean, you wake up, you fly, you get lunch, you fly, you get dinner, you work out, or you work out and you get dinner, and you go to sleep and you do it all again. We fly 2 practice shows every day, and then usually a practice of the whole formation on Saturday, and take Sunday off. So it's a lot.
And Mo, for you, for the Thunderbirds, how different or similar is the routine for winter training?
Well, it always surprised me. We from about Halloween to mid-March, we're at home training, or we were at Nellis, and then went on the road. Very similar to the Blues schedule. But I always remember, like, the Blues would deploy to El Centro during training, like Matt said, and then be on the road. And then I guess they consider that shore duty, which it's like, wow. But now we're more like our training was at a place called Indian Springs, now called Creech Army Airfield, or Creech Airfield, excuse me. And it's all used by UAVs now, Predators and things like that. So we have to find a place, and during the training season, they go to El Centro and work with the Blues, and they also go to a place called Spaceport, New Mexico. Look that one up. That's probably the most remote part of America, and they go there for 3 months, 3 weeks to a month, and then they also use Edwards. It's really hard to get training slots at Nellis now, so they're essentially deployed during the training season, and now on the road like the Blues.
I'll put in a plug for our El Centro group too, because that's what made it work. Like I said, we had to leave the family behind, but there was a whole contingent of people that had been watching. They've been doing the Blue Angels long before any of us have been doing the Blue Angels down there, and these farmers and just salt of the earth guys down in El Centro, and they would just take care of you. I mean, there'd be burritos would show up in the morning every now and then, or they load bird up with asparagus to take back to the families, and that's what made it work, was that there was a kind of an alternate family there in California.
Mo, were you going to hop in there with a question?
Yeah, I was just y'all deploy with 7 jets or
To the air show?
yeah.
Yeah, the 7
Yeah,
jet
'cause-
the 7 jets to spare.
Yeah.
Or sometimes, like you talked about, sometimes we'll plug it in. Usually not on Saturday to Sunday, but we might plug it in if we're at at a military base that has
Yeah.
tactical aviators. We'll put them in the back seat because we used to tell guys, when you go fly, we're finishing the air show. So if just because you don't want to go anymore doesn't mean we're stopping.
Yeah.
But then we have it as a spare jet. So the 7 jet sits off to the side normally, ready to go. And actually, it has the crew chief sitting in it, listening to the radio. So if he gets a clue that something's going on with the formation, then he'll actually start the jet, the right motor, and get it all ready to go for whatever pilot's going to show up. And then you jump out and jump in, and they strap you in, and you go.
Yeah. We have one more pilot as far as that goes. We always deploy with 8 if we can. Our number 7 pilot is our operations officer, and number 8's our narrator. And we take the 2-seater so we can do incentive rides if we've got it. We don't like to use it in the show. It's a little bit different than the other ones. It has a little less gas, a little different flight characteristics. So, but we have that extra spare.
How many shows did you guys? Well, I guess how many cities did you visit per season when you guys were on the team? Is it different from what they're doing now?
It is for the Thunderbirds. We if you take from mid to late March until the end of October, you've got X amount of weekends, and we scheduled about 80 shows each year. I ended up doing 140 total. So we had a bunch that were canceled for a few that were canceled for weather. But what they do now that's different with us is, and it was tough for us, we would do a show on Saturday, and then we would call it a fly show Sunday. We would get up early, deploy, and do another show if it was within about 250 miles. But those were like 14-hour days. They don't do that now. They pretty much go somewhere for the weekend, and they stay the whole weekend, which gives them a lot more free time to interact with the rest of the air show industry, as an example, and do some of the other stuff that we were never able to do.
Matt, what about the Blues? How many shows were you doing?
Yeah, we
back in your
had
day?
it was typically low 43 to 45 show sites, and then a total of 78 shows. It's not quite a double up because there's some of those are just flybys, or Pensacola. Obviously, we can do that on the off season. We kind of do a Pensacola beach show in the middle of the summer, which corresponds with mainly when our applicants were showing up. So we had to do interviews with the finalists down there, and so we'd have a beach show there. That was just a little bit easier. Beach shows are always a little bit tough, but so that was pretty much 43 places, and like Mo said, you just multiply out the weekends, and that's it. Now, the narrator, he's got to be at all those shows, and then he's also got to go do all his winter visits for 2 or 3 months. So the narrator's gone a lot. It's kind of a harsh awakening. He's probably gone 300 days out of the year.
Gotcha. And, we've already alluded to the teams collaborating a bit over the years, and you guys have talked about some fun activities. How did your teams formally interact on a more formal basis when you guys were on the team?
I know that we always got together because our similarities are far greater than our differences, and so it was always an opportunity to get together and talk and see some stuff. And in some ways, like we talked about alternating show sites, especially if it was a new show site that the Thunderbirds had done for the first time the year before, and we're doing it the next year. They work a lot of the kinks out of the system of what it takes to have a jet team there, particularly with the airspace and the FAA control and stuff like that. We also started a program, I think it started when I was a narrator in '89, of swapping a very senior enlisted uh, maintainer between the two squadrons, and I believe that's still going on. I know it went on for a long time. So we had a master sergeant from the Thunderbird team on our working with us, and we sent one of our master chiefs over there, which was really a cool way for the maintainers to figure out their stuff.
Yeah, Charlie Sanders was our first guy.
Yeah.
What about Mo? Do you have any other recollections of the team interactions?
Well, we back in the day, you had to have 1 to 60,000 scale photos of each of the show sites, and we'd sometimes share imagery because you wanted to get something that was relatively current. Back in the day, you had to have an RF4 flyby into a photo recce of these different sites, and sometimes it's hard to get up to date photos, so we would work that. And again, talking about a lot of the show sites and some of the challenges. Both my years, we got to do the Chicago Airshow, which was fun. And actually our 3000th Airshow was at the Azalea Festival in Norfolk. So we did our 3000th Airshow in April of 1990 in Norfolk, Virginia, which was obviously traditionally Navy site. And I remember being over the USS Nimitz upside down, flying right down the show line. So that was pretty cool. But so we share a lot on the different show sites that we do and all the obstacles and lessons learned.
Gotcha. And I think you both have touched on the maintainers a bit, but we're a big fan of the maintainers on this channel. Mo, talk to me about your appreciation for the maintainers on the Thunderbirds.
Well, it's an enduring relationship. Special people, like Matt said, it's probably tougher to get on the team as an enlisted guy. And then each year we announce the show line. We call them the show dogs back in my day. The number one crew chief and his assistant, all the way down the line, we'd announce that, and that was a big deal for the boys. We call them the boys, but for the team. And again, they would all work together until everything was done. They'd work as a team, and we as the chairman of the board, there's 11 board members, and I've got several chiefs on my board, and all of them are former Thunderbirds with a lot of experience, and they love getting together and talking about everything they did. And it was probably the most significant moment for a lot of them. Just the quality of people that you get on the team. It's hard to describe. And my crew chief, one of them, Chief Barnes, Chud called him. And I work on the F-35 now. In fact, when he retired, he was somebody we wanted to get a hold of, and he's doing great things. So these are long, enduring relationships and great people.
Yeah, and Matt, you've talked about it a lot already with the Blues, but any good memories from your time with the maintainers on the Blues?
I think probably what we were just talking about, just the can-do attitude, and nobody's bitching about, well, we got to stay late or we got to do something. I mean, obviously we got to fly an air show the next day, so we can't be down there turning wrenches at 2 o'clock in the morning. But they'll all be there at 2 o'clock in the morning, doing whatever it takes, and whoever it is, they'll do whatever it takes. I know there's kind of a funny talk about the relationship between the pilots and the crew chief. We have sort of a famous former solo pilot that just in a casual mention to his crew chief one time said there's this one tree down in El Centro, this mesquite tree, that's gotten bigger every year, and it's in the way right now because every time right where I want to roll in, there's trees in the way. And so he went out the next day for the practice, and the tree was gone. And they went out with a chainsaw in the middle of the night and cut the tree down. So whatever it
Yeah,
takes.
if memory serves me correct, that was Denny Sapp. I think he's told that story here.
I know,
Well,
I leave the names out. I don't.
it's a public story. He's told it here.
Yeah.
We're safe. Go ahead, Mo.
We went to a show in Florida one time and trying to dodge thunderstorms as part of the job, and we weren't as successful on one particular trip, and the raindrops were pretty big, and they do a heck of a job on the paint scheme, so peeled off a little bit of the paint on the jets, and it takes 24 to 48 hours to cure a jet after you repaint it, and that whole trip, the whole team was, after every show, was painting jets all night long, and everybody was pitching in, and it's that kind of stuff, that dedication and perseverance to get through it. That was a tough trip.
Gotcha. And Mo, as we start to close out here, what has your time on the Thunderbirds, how has it impacted your life after you left the team?
Well, it it's been a great it's been great. People know who the Thunderbirds and the Blue Angels are, and they appreciate us, and the fact that I know in our history, and it's very similar with Matt. As far as the demo pilots, there's been 238 on the Thunderbirds since 1953. So it's a pretty small fraternity of the demo pilots. We have about 2,800 people that have worn a Thunderbird patch, all ranks. And, over the course of 75 years, that's not many people. So you're sort of unique, and the word gets around, and it's sort of a halo effect. People, you're considered, it's good credibility. So it helps just having that, especially working in a program like the F-35. If you speak, it carries a little more credibility just because, well, he was a Thunderbird, or he was a Blue Angel, or she was.
Gotcha. What about you, Matt? What about the impact that the Blues, what it's had on your life since you left the team?
Yeah, it obviously has a really big impact. And we keep up with all the folks. We do a lot of work with the Blue Angel Association and the Blue Angel Foundation, which are doing some great work for raising money and putting on events to help the wounded warriors. We have so many guys that come back from combat and are the visible scars are not the only scars that they hold, and we have to take care of those guys. But also just in general, going back to, I came out, I went back to the fleet, went to the training squadron, and then went to a combat squadron, then back to the training squadron. And just to be out there and see the fruits of the labor of how important it is to have the right people, not only in the officer ranks, but in the enlisted ranks. And that's a huge thing. And like Mo said, you got some credibility there, with folks to put in a good word, or you always have people coming up to you saying, "Hey, I'm thinking about this. Can I go? When can I do that? And or what's the timing?" And so, it's a good opportunity to steer things the way you want them to be steered, for people on the team that are the quality people you're looking for.
Gotcha. And here, final question for both of you, Matt. We'll start with you. If you had a piece of advice or anything to share with a current member of the demo team, what would that be?
I think it would just be, be humble about it. I've always taken the approach that I never really, I flew for the airlines for a long time, and I've flown entire trips with people without them knowing that I was a Blue Angel, just because it never came up. Obviously, if it comes up, we'll talk about it and do all that kind of stuff. But you're really, and I know Mo can attest to this. When you look at the selection process, a little bit of a wiggle one way or the other, and you wouldn't be a Blue Angel, no matter what your skill level was. If you're not in the right place to go, career-wise, or maybe your first year, your second year. Mo said he went on the second year. If he'd been more senior, then maybe that wouldn't have happened. So, if I basically just don't take yourself too seriously, because it's a gift and an opportunity, and I think you should see it as that, and do the best you can for everybody.
Nice. What about you, Mo?
I echo what Matt said. Humility. We spend more time with these guys and gals than we do our own family during the 2 years, 3 years we're on the team, and little idiosyncrasies become big after a while. So humility and respect for each other. And again, the 2 years goes quick, and I always like to talk to the current team and try to get to know them. And a lot of them, oh God, it's alumni again. But a lot of them are also very appreciative of the people who've gone before them. I try to encourage them because they're going to be alumni pretty soon, and we are one family. So.
All right, I love it. Well, gentlemen, I can't thank you enough. I actually had a blast listening to you share your stories and interact here, and I appreciate it. Thanks so much.
Yeah,
Thank
well,
you.
thank
It's
you for
great.
setting this up, Ryan. And Matt, it was great to see you again after all
Yeah,
this time.
let's not make it another 20 years before we talk. Huh?
Yeah, take care.